morning, everybody. I think we'll get started. First, let me apologize. I'm a little bit under the weather, so my voice is a little weak. That means this meeting could go a little bit faster. It could also mean that Ryan's going to have to talk a little bit more, which he's pretty excited about. Thanks again for coming.
Really quick then.
Thanks again to SMG for hosting us. This is I think this might be the same meeting we started out in 6-7 months ago. Thanks also for adding an additional meeting from what we originally talked about to keep this thing moving along in a great direction. We're going to start, as we usually do, with any comments from the public. Is there anybody here that would like to address the committee? It's okay. If not, we'll keep moving. Like I mentioned before, we've come a long ways over the last 6 months, and it was in this room that the mayor addressed us, asked us, kind of gave us the scope of this committee, said at a high level, look at the arena, look at the convention center, look at the baseball stadium, and some of those associated things that matter to this campus. Take a 2040 vision, and at a high level, try to give us a direction for the city to follow as we move forward. I'm proud of you because we have done that. I've listened to many hours of debate, from really big, broad visions to really small, let's not do anything, and then landing on the recommendations we discussed at the last meeting, which it's important that we not only think big, but we come up with some economically feasible recommendations in the end. And I feel like you all worked very hard to do that, so I appreciate that. I think we've done a good job of trying to be as open to the public as possible, seeking public input. Eric, you've done a great job with that, so we appreciate those efforts. In today's meeting, we're going to go through those recommendations one by one. You will notice that there are some changes from what you may have seen earlier in the week in the first draft of the report based on comments from the committee members, so pay attention as we go through them. You'll get a little bit of time to read them. We're not going to go through them word by word, but we will spend enough time on them so that everybody is familiar with what this last draft looks like. It is perfectly fine and acceptable today to bring up other points, ideas, conversation points of either changes you want to those, either supporting mechanisms or a tweak to the language in the recommendations. All those things are appropriate and encouraged. With that, Ryan, anything I'm forgetting?
I just say thanks again to all the members of the group for all your time, effort, and energy, and also all the supporting groups, the CVB, SMG, Canaries, etc. It's been real helpful, and I think it is important, from a level set perspective that, we really, our job here was to look at what's the future of the events center campus and some of the facilities in and around that. And I think what we really tried to do was look through the lens of understanding all the facts and try to make some recommendations based on that would impact basically the future and trajectory of this campus. I think from our discussions, we all can agree that it could have been really easy to get off topic or scope because there's lots of exciting opportunities in and around what we're discussing, but I think we did a pretty good job of staying focused and trying to make the appropriate recommendations for this campus moving forward. So thanks again for all your time, effort, and energy. It's appreciated. It's not easy. And look forward to just launching into our discussion here on the recommendations we have here and taking any last-minute comments or feedback that we have to get this into final form and to the mayor. Any other comments from the group or observations before we try to get started?
I think it's important to understand that we all realize the work on this campus doesn't end. The decisions don't stop once this report is final. There's a great deal of work that needs to continue to be done. It was our job to get it to a point where we had kind of a flow and some common sense approach to some of the big nuggets on the campus so that work could continue. So with that, let's get into the first topic, please.
And so we're gonna walk through this. We're gonna talk about the arena, the convention center, baseball stadium, and then some of the additional considerations. So just order of magnitude, that's directionally where we're gonna head. In the final report that goes to the mayor, there will be a transmittal letter, and there'll be some additional background on the information we reviewed and some of the methodology. But for the interest of our time today, we're going to just focus specifically on the recommendations and some of the considerations and things that went into that. And so you all have in front of you a copy of this, but this is, again, the excerpt of the recommendation portion of this. And so we're going to start with the arena. And so based on all the information that we reviewed, including the CSL study and hearing from the different user groups, the recommendation we discussed at the last meeting that we're bringing forward here is that the task force recommends the city demolish the arena and repurpose the existing location for the benefit of the proposed expansion of the convention center. I'm just going to stop right there and ask the group if there's any comments or feedback on what we came up with last time and if that's in line with what we discussed. Okay? What we're trying to do as we outline this is say, hey, here's the recommendation, and here are the things that went into the recommendation. And so I can go through this bullet by bullet, but I don't think that that's really an effective use of our time. But I think the high-level things that we talked about that brought us to this consideration were the age of the facility, its use, the programming being down, and then just some of the operating costs annually that we have here, in addition to just some of the capital investments that we need to make moving forward just to keep it as is. And so as part of that process, we took a real big look at the CSL study on can this facility be repurposed? And we looked at what they've done in Tulsa, Long Beach, other facilities, and based on the information that we discussed, what you really get with the retrofitted facility is one that's probably not what we need in terms of space and utilization, and it'd be frankly quite expensive. And so I don't know if Andrea or some of the other members of the group want to talk to that point, and if as we're listing out the considerations that went into the recommendation, if there's anything they'd like to add or just talk about since we're here.
Yeah, I think that it's a really good point to bring up that we have an operational loss in that facility, and it will continue to have an operational loss until something is done with that space. And the amount it'll cost to demolish it will actually pay for itself in under 3 years. And so if this were my house or even my job or my business and I'm losing that much money each year, it only makes sense that as the taxpayers, we don't need to subsidize a building that's no longer fitting our needs. Though it did a wonderful job up to now serving those needs, there's other options in the community now that fit those needs for our community.
Well, I'll make a comment, and I would say that when I came into this, I had, my mindset was, we're not gonna tear down the arena, it's great. But when you look at the numbers, you cannot come to any other conclusion. The amount of money we're gonna have to spend on a 6-year-old building to keep it the way it is, it's not profitable. And the need that this community has for more convention space in one location is huge. We're missing out on the future if we don't do this recommendation. And I'm gonna carry that forward as I say it, but this committee has completely turned me around. The numbers have done it for me. Now, I'm no accountant, but I can see the numbers and the writing on the wall. So that's one of the things I appreciate, all the hard work, and certainly when you talk to Jared and Andrea about the construction costs and the building and what needs to be done if we're to repurpose it. You can't put lipstick on a pig, and that's what we would be doing if we tried to repurpose it.
I'd like to add an item to the considerations. Sorry to the team that's got to add a little bit more language here, but I'd like to include one of the major considerations for me, which was the fact that there's no longer a consistent, viable, repetitive tenant over in the space. I think you look at the 2009 study, and things have changed so much since then. You had the Stampede, Skyforce, Storm, all playing in that facility. They're all no longer in that facility, and in the meantime, of course, we picked up the Augie basketball team, which was great, but they're now gone also. So just the fact that that the arena no longer has a consistent tenant is a big consideration for me.
And this is just semantics, but if you're a numbers person like I am, and I'm positive there's a lot more like me in Sioux Falls, if we could add just the language where it's annually the arena requires an average, because all of this is public information, and if someone wants to do the calculation themselves, they can. But this way, it doesn't lock into those numbers being true every time.
And just for clarification, we are referencing bullet 4, the fourth bullet down, where it gets into some of the specifics with respect to the revenue generated and the average annual operating loss is $614,000 a year.
Andrew, do you have any idea what the market rate out there is for per square foot construction cost for the addition of the 60,000 square feet? You know, we're talking here about estimated cost to renovate the existing arena being 10 to 12 million.
Yeah,
How does that differ from, you know, the going rate out there, demolishing the arena, which, I mean, I completely makes sense, it'll pay for itself in less than 3 years, but what's the price tag on the new construction of 60,000 square feet?
Now, based on a team approach, I believe that the square footage price point could be between $350 and $450.
Okay.
And the team would need to be making decisions and moving through design together with cost parameters in mind.
It's a pretty big range until we get to the point where we can program that exact space or know where on the campus exactly it's going to go.
Right. The question stems from, you know, what long-term, and this is much beyond our scope, but what is the pro forma and what's the incremental return on investment? You know, if we're going to spend $350 to $450 a square foot and add 60,000 square feet of brand-new convention space, how do we recoup that through conventions we're going to bring in, and where do we see the benefit of the reinvestment of the dollars?
Right, and I'm smiling because we actually did that homework. We weren't, because it was out of the purview of this scope, we weren't able to include it in this, but Tony and CBP, if you wanted to comment on that now, or if we wait until the convention center, or the convention.
Fortunately, we were able to get that information, national information on what that return looks like when we're able to bring somebody to our community. And that was part of our consideration in our discussion and saying, what are we getting right now in terms of visitors, and what is the potential with additional space. So yeah, we can draw a line to that.
There is significant economic impact with additional square footage. Did you want to talk to them?
Sure. We have an economic calculator with our International Association, which is DMAI, Destination Management Association International, and they have event calculators where we can literally plug in the number of people, the number of nights they're here, et cetera, and they will spit back at us the actual number based on their formulas. And these formulas are used internationally, not only in the United States, and they're formulated after much study, research. So we know in Sioux Falls that the average convention trade show, the person spends between probably, average again, $200 to $300 a day when they're in Sioux Falls. So you can calculate accordingly. We can put all that together to calculate that out for you according to the number of people and the square footage.
I've heard 2 suggested changes so far. Are there any others? Everybody feel comfortable with those 2 changes? Any objections? Let's vote on the arena recommendation, please. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Recommendation is adopted. Mr. Budmeier, did you get the language you needed for those two changes in inclusion?
Thank you.
Thank you. Convention Center. Let's take a second to read the recommendation. I think through the many hours of conversation on the convention centers specifically, we heard a great deal of information from Terry and her team about the competitive nature of the industry. I think that chart and the consideration is important to show where we stack in terms of available flat floor square feet. And I think the public input put a high priority on flat floor space. One of the things we've talked about, and I'm still a big believer in, is that the convention industry brings daily impact to the economy of Sioux Falls. The Premier Center is great, and we have these big boosts of energies on certain nights, but almost every day there's something going on in the convention center space that's benefiting the city. And right now we're losing out on even more of that by not having the available square feet. Tony, any overview from this conversation you want to touch on?
Well, I think this captures what we came up with. A lot of discussion, a lot of review on the need for additional space. And I like how this is laid out.
Go ahead, Tom. No?
Okay.
Any suggested changes?
Should we be noting anything in here that this is a 3 to 5 year plan, but we recognize that even this 3 to 5 year plan still brings us at the back of the pack? And so a longer range vision needs to include more space here and elsewhere in the Sioux Falls community.
Thank you for bringing that up. I was sitting here getting excited in my chair because I do want to make the point that while we so appreciate the addition of 60,000 square feet and think that will help, by no means does it bring, as you can see by the chart of some of our competitive cities, by no means does it bring us up to speed with our competition.
I think it should be added.
Agree.
I think this is step one. Additional steps are needed. How much and where, I think, needs additional consideration, but we definitely need more than just this. And this is a good time to set that tone.
I think the one thing that I add that I think was helpful in the process when we were trying to learn about the convention business and what we have for square footage is that the CVB is taking requests, proposals daily, and a lot of the stuff is out 3 years, 5 years, etc. And so while there's a long range aspect to this, we're already behind. And so I think there needs to probably be some sense of urgency in terms of planning so that the CVB, SMG, etc., can start bidding on some of the other things that will, when we're in the realm of being a little bit more competitive, some of the folks in our peer group. And I think when we talk to the Sports Authority and other folks, they'd say the same thing. So these things all take time, especially when there's several dominoes, as we've said, in this process in order to expand space here or elsewhere. And so just point out that I think probably needs to be a little bit of urgency on it in terms of evaluating what we're going to do.
And Ryan, along with that, we need to recognize that That sense of urgency is very real. Many of these cities are studying or are in the process of moving forward with adding more space. As we sit today and talk about adding 60,000, they're already in the process of adding more and more. And many other cities that are not on this list are adding more that we compete with too.
Terry, would you be supportive of additional flat floor space beyond this, what we're recommending in alternate locations, or do you feel like it all needs to be together?
It's got to be under one roof if it's going to be a true convention center. People don't want to, then it's busing, and then it's, they just, no, they want it all under one roof. It's just like the hotel issue. I mean, we have two pieces of business just within the last 7 days that have turned no on us because of multiple hotel usage. They want 1 or 2 hotels that are attached. It's the same thing with convention space. You can't move them around. They want under one roof. And they can get it just about anywhere in the country.
I think part of what I gleaned from our conversations was that adding additional square footage elsewhere at a smaller amount allowed us to reschedule this convention center space for larger conventions versus what's currently being scheduled here. Is that true? So say you would like to schedule a large convention, but the dates aren't available because of a few smaller local options that are being scheduled. Would an additional detached convention center help with scheduling that?
Well, if it's detached and it's a whole nother convention center somewhere with another hotel attached to that and all of the walkability with that, yes. I mean, if this were a convention center here and it's used for some conventions, meetings, events, trade shows, and if you're talking about another convention center, meeting space somewhere else with the same amenities, yes.
I think maybe we can kind of clarify a little bit here in the recommendation that and maybe I propose an addition to say that I think that the additional space is for the purpose of gathering large trade shows, large conventions to Sioux Falls. And I think that's the main goal as far as adding that additional space, and that's where it gets to some of the scheduling issues we've had out here that have been a real big problem. Things get booked so far in advance, and all of a sudden the smaller thing takes away from a big event that we could be having out here. So I'd like to add that the real goal of this is to get those big shows that are the size and caliber of Pheasant Fest.
Very big and or multiple
At
the
occurring
same
at the same
time,
time.
yes.
Yep.
Because the big Pheasant Fest, I mean, in reality, we're not going to have a big national convention in Sioux Falls every day. But our goal, we work every day to make it happen more often, but we have to have the facilities to get out there and sell it and get on the map that we have that availability. So when we get to that point, hooray, but in the meantime, we have to continue to sell multiple events, or we want to have that opportunity to sell multiple events at the same time.
Eric, I would say too, just yesterday, we've had meetings with CVB, but we've adopted booking guidelines, and the goal of that is to protect space rentals for those multiple day events, those bigger conventions and everything like that. So there are different tiers based on your needs, room nights, space requirements and everything like that. So those guidelines have been adopted, and again, that's to protect the business that we're talking about here. We're talking about the 3 to 5 year, even 2 years out. So that is in place already, so.
That's good to hear. And I don't know what you guys think. I don't think, knowing that, as far as the guidelines go, I don't think we necessarily need to adopt anything about scheduling and stuff like that in our report, but I think it's certainly good to hear that that's in place.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Terry.
How about the language on the consideration of, this is kind of step one, but additional space is needed? Is that a comment that should be added in considerations rather than the actual recommendation or in the recommendation?
I think it should be, as look to design this additional space, ensuring that the 2040 vision includes the ability for our community to go further. And I like what you said in terms of moving with a sense of urgency, ensuring that is included in this verbiage. Because in our discussions with CVB and others, the need is now, and we're behind now. And this really doesn't put us ahead, it helps us catch up.
Not being in the construction business, or maybe not even speaking in reality right now, but is there any way to, 3 to 5 years is a long time. Any way to
I think when we
make
talked
that a
about
little
it, Terry,
sooner?
if it's feasible, what we
Yeah.
talked about is what is going on in the arena and how long it'll take for step one,
Yeah.
and being realistic that there are some considerations there. If we could start tomorrow,
That
would
would
be
be,
ideal, but
Maybe it should read within the next 5 years instead of saying it, this kind of reads like it has to be at least 3 years. And it probably does, but why limit ourselves with that?
Well, we may need some clarification because like design work could start far in advance before when dirt actually starts to move.
correct.
So maybe that extra 60,000 should be open in the next 3 years. Might be
Better
a
version.
better verbiage to use.
Does that sound better, Terry?
of course, yes.
I think we're all with
Every
you
day
on-
we
I
can
think we're all
get
with you
more.
on having it
Yeah.
happen right now.
As soon as possible.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Questions? Everybody understand the changes we've made this morning to what you see on the screen, or need any clarification? If not, let's vote on the convention center. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Thank you. Next slide, please. Sorry.
Is it my turn?
It's your turn.
Sticking me with the demolition ones. We're on to the baseball stadium, and we've got the recommendation up there, and give you all a chance to read through that real briefly. The summary is the task force recommends the city demolish the existing baseball stadium and repurpose the existing location in a manner that further benefits the events campus and the convention center. However, finding a different location for professional baseball should continue to be a priority for the city. And we recommend taking a deeper dive into looking at where that's at, what the size is, what the amenities are, and how that would be structured. We've got the considerations laid out and some bullets on the public input. I'd ask Mr. Hurlbert to maybe provide some color on the work that their subcommittee did on this and how we got to where we're at.
Yeah, thank you. First, I appreciate LNS for not trying to bury the lead here and doing a pretty good job of putting that out there, but I think that there's some significant ifs and buts that are a part of this. Again, is what we've been talking about. A lot of dominoes have to happen for this recommendation to kind of this clearly be proposed, I think, from our committee's point of view. Again, remember, this presumes that the convention center is going to double and potentially double again over time. This presumes that there might be some hotel expansion on this site. So this presumes that the event center campus is going to get awfully crowded. There's going to be additional needs for parking as well here that isn't necessarily identified in this document. So really, there's some things that need to be clarified, that this happens as a result of some other things that happen. It also, I think we almost could propose to, and I appreciate getting to the brass tacks right out of the gate, but this additional study really needs to happen in advance of, certainly demolition or something like that. We need to have a plan or be discussing the plan prior to, in my mind, and be working through all of the different variables, and there are a lot. So there's a few caveats I would try to add to that. I think that we know that the baseball, from the city's point of view, is operating at a loss of about $240,000 a year. There's a lot of maintenance costs and repairs that are needed on the stadium of $3 million or something of this nature. I think all of that is reality, but I think the important thing with baseball is it's served us extremely well for 65 years in this location. But there's also the opportunity loss that I think that is something that is not necessarily being considered. And I think that this is an opportunity that over the last 65 years we haven't seen any opportunity gains in property and sales tax opportunities. And the 2018 CSNL report, which I'd also like to have included in here, talks about that walkability and the ability for this stadium to contribute to property and sales taxes. That pays for schools, that pays for roads, that pays for all kinds of stuff. That doesn't get worked into this equation, but we're seeing other communities take advantage of that. So that's another reason why this sort of fits into that puzzle piece, I think, in our mind. So I'd like to propose that this document does support that CSNL report from 2018. And it also takes into account the first decisions on the convention center expansion and future expansions beyond that, the hotel, the arena, and future parking needs. Is that?
It's a great summary. And I feel like it's a little bit, again, through that lens of 2040, do we see 80 to 90-year-old facilities on this campus being the most viable use of that space on this campus? I think that's part of the consideration as well. Any other conversation or questions on the baseball stadium? Any other inclusions anybody would like to propose?
I just wanted to clarify, because I struggle with the idea of tearing it down. So, if I was understanding you correctly, what you're saying is number one, this task force, this additional task force should be assigned and set up to figure out some of the more intricate details. And then the second portion would be a lot of ifs and then. If this expands and if, then you would say, assuming that the task force is in agreement with that, then you would say, then you tear it down. But this isn't something that you would say you would tear down. Like we were talking about the other, in a 3 to 5 year kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's some variables, some decisions have to be made prior to this. I think that's accurate. I'm comfortable with the master plan goal that this moves. I think that's sort of what I'm comfortable with. I do think that there's still some discussion about probably what you're getting at is how to finance something like this. What's the future look like? There's a lot of different methods to do that. We don't know the answers to that yet, which is why I think that's what this next committee has to help determine, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so I guess I'm just wanting to clarify that for me, a yes vote on this is saying that I am in agreement with, first we have another task force that digs even deeper, and then you start having these, because I'm all about moving forward as well, but I just don't want to say yes.
Right.
And there's, that's not clear. in here that first there's this additional task force.
I'm comfortable with that. I don't know if others.
I'm not, I think it's two-pronged. I think that the task force is assigned because we care about baseball in this community, and we want to see it continue to flourish and grow, because that's where all of our kids want to do right now. And into the future, I hope. I'm also a baseball fan. But I'm a numbers person, and the numbers are saying we're just throwing money at this facility right now. We're losing $250,000 every year operationally. We have to do several millions dollars of investment just to bring it up to safety standards, which we are doing as a community anyway. And so a no vote on this would be saying you're comfortable continuing to throw money at that facility, from my perspective. But then again, I'm a numbers person and I build buildings. So I want to see baseball flourish in Sioux Falls. That is true. I also believe it's true that this stadium under the current agreement can't sustain itself.
Which I can agree with that, and I understand what you're saying. It just feels like, and I wasn't on your committee, so I just have this sense that it's like there's this rush, and have all of the, we know all of the facts, and it's probably because I wasn't on your committee and I don't know, I'm just seeing this little thing here.
Yeah.
And admittedly, I'm a football fan, so, but I'm out here fighting for that to stay. So, I'm just saying, I want there to be baseball because according to the public input, there's a love of baseball here. So how do we take what's there, and there's not really much momentum, but how do we build on momentum, make momentum maybe, and not lose ground? I guess if we don't really have a plan, we just tear it down right now and.
Well, here's how I would summarize it, is if we look at this campus in the year 2040, it's going to look really different. It's not going to look like it does today. And so we have to try to make some recommendations and take some steps forward, because in 2040, we're a baseball town. And I don't envision I don't think this group envisions the baseball stadium being out here. I think it's somewhere else in town, and it's a high caliber facility that people want to come to, and they want to make a trip out of it, a destination, whether it's, for a birthday party or a corporate outing, etc. And so it's a long way between today and there, but we have to make a recommendation that try to catapult us toward that future destination where it's at, what it looks like. And I think what we're trying to say is, admittedly, it's beyond our scope to try to suggest where it's at, what it looks like, how much it costs, and who pays for it. There's a lot of moving parts attached to that, but I think there's some people a lot smarter than me, and that know a lot more about baseball, that can help us decide that. But I think we're looking through the lens of 2040 out here. And I think that's kind of the conclusion we're going to come to. Is that fair?
Yeah.
I'd agree with that, Ryan, and I think maybe we can kind of clarify some of this in the recommendation. From serving on the group, I think the recommendation is strictly that we feel that baseball is not right for this campus. So I don't know if it's possibly the word demolish that maybe gets a little scary, just because that's going to maybe occur over a period of years. And unlike the arena, we don't propose that to happen perhaps as fast. And then I know some, whether it's in this group or outside this group, there's some people kind of hung up on this task force, whether we should recommend another task force and basically relitigate everything that we've discussed. And I think, in my opinion, that the task force is strictly to determine where the location is and who's going to pay for it. But our recommendation is that baseball is not right for this campus, and I think that is a big decision and one that we're making. So I don't think that's for any other task force to decide. I think we've made our recommendation.
Does that answer your question, or do you
Yes.
feel any more comfortable about our approach?
One of the things we talked about at our last meeting about baseball that I don't see in here yet is the desire for the community to have a MLB affiliation of some sort. Is that something we want to have included in the recommendation?
That's probably outside of the, ability for this group to really make too strong of a recommendation, but certainly, why couldn't this additional task force, again, knowing that this isn't the campus it's going to be at for this recommendation, but that future task force that's studying location, financial feasibility, Major League Baseball affiliation feasibility, that could easily be added like that.
Any other additions, questions?
For me, it seems a little strange for us to, as a task force, recommend another task force. I don't know if there's an opportunity for us just to say, this is what we see, we don't see it here. Mayor, how you take it from here, that in city, and all the stakeholders, you take it from here, but it feels a little strange. I know we know that additional study needs to happen. How that happens,
Maybe isn't for us to define.
yeah, I just don't know if that's in our scope.
I think that's a fair comment. Other thoughts on that?
Well, I think us recommending another task force is a little interesting. I think all we have to do is say, there needs to be, before this baseball stadium is torn down, there needs to be a plan for baseball in Sioux Falls. And I don't care if TJ comes up with a plan and says, here's my paycheck, go ahead and do it, or who comes up with a plan. There needs to be a plan for baseball in Sioux Falls. And we can tell the mayor that. That's what you need to do. I agree that baseball is not right for this campus. But baseball needs to be in Sioux Falls. Let's not tear this down until there's a plan to have baseball in Sioux Falls.
Other thoughts? Anybody disagree with that sentiment? Or have an alternate perspective? I think we can wordsmith this a little bit to include that in the recommendation, tone down the task force verbiage. There's many different ways the mayor could choose to attack that particular issue in the future of baseball, so let's not overly define what that box looks like. Let's give him the flexibility to figure out the right answer for the community as a whole. All in favor?
Let's take one step back. Do you want our scribe over there maybe just hit the summary button on what you have over there in terms of the recommendation, so we all are crystal clear on what we're supporting here? I think we get the general gist, but I think for, just to be clear.
Yeah. So basically, the recommendation here would be to work, the city work to identify a new location for baseball in Sioux Falls. Once that location is secured, that the task force recommends that the city transition baseball out from the event center campus to the new location. And then probably the task force recommends the city consider a study to examine future location, stadium size, amenities, feasibility of future baseball stadium options. And then probably including in there attracting a Major League Baseball, an MLB opportunity.
I think the summary button is we're a baseball town, and long-term, this stadium's probably somewhere else in this city. There's a lot of other moving parts that need to fall into place to determine where that's at, but that's probably up for the mayor and others to decide. But our decision, the recommendation is long-term stadium somewhere else, and not on this campus. Is that Tom, fair, or anybody else?
That is, could I offer that this document, which has the CSL report for 2018, which more or less describes it that way, would be a part of that? This was a professional organization that did some of that study. Could we include that as a part of that recommendation? Is that okay? Everybody has this document. Pertaining to baseball specifically. Yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah, I think our recommendation implies that additional work needs to be done without saying task force or study, or that's for our community to determine what that means.
Any other comments, thoughts on that? All those in favor of the recommendation as summarized, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Dan?
This was kind of our catch-all category of things we've been talking about over the last 6-7 months. Parking is pretty difficult, and what that answer is going to be depends on some of the timelines for the recommendations we've made and how those things fall into place. You know, if the baseball stadium isn't here, it's going to add an additional 600 to 700 parking spaces. That's going to be part of the equation, but the timelines of additional flat floor space, the timelines of potential new baseball stadium, the timelines of a potential new hotel, all those things are going to play a role. I think it's difficult for us to have a hard and fast recommendation on parking until some of those other variables are laid out. So I think what's important, obviously this is a very broad and vague recommendation on parking, but again, it all ties together, including the third to last point of adjacent land acquisition. We don't know if and when, over the next 20, 30 years, the city is able to acquire additional property. That's going to play a role in parking as well. So it's pretty broad. We've heard over and over from our user groups how important additional hotel rooms, additional connected hotel rooms are to the facility. From not only the CBB, but also from the Sports Authority, who definitely needs more hotel rooms and meeting room space for the potential to increase the use of the Premier Center for their needs.
Dan, could I comment?
Yes, ma'am.
It really is important that as the additional convention center space becomes a reality, that those hotel rooms become a reality at the same time. Today, we have a problem booking business because we don't have a minimum of 400 hotel rooms attached today. So if the city builds additional convention center space without additional hotel rooms at the same time, we're kind of back in the same issue. It's wonderful to have the additional meeting space, but without the hotel rooms, we've got a problem again. People want the hotel rooms attached. So we bring more people into meetings, but we don't have more hotel room space, we've got a problem. So I don't know if there could be some wording in there about that needing to be in conjunction with building of more space. One without the other isn't gonna do us a whole lot of good.
A couple comments, and I apologize, I wasn't here last month when you guys discussed this, and maybe make a recommendation in here, but I feel strongly that the hotel piece of this is going to be a very complex piece of the puzzle. The size the franchise, the services, the amenities that we're going to offer in a hotel that are going to be attractive to a developer and or a management company to come in here and feel like they have a chance at success are going to be largely dependent on what the final master plan looks like. How many additional square feet are we adding to the facility? What other amenities are coming to the area? So, I mean, just for perspective, right now the Sheraton's got 243 rooms, which is just under 89,000 available rooms per year. I know through conversations with folks at Marriott that in 2018, roughly 65% was the occupancy in the Sheraton on an annual basis. You know, that's 57,000 rooms that they rented. The average daily rate, okay, not great. It's a hard business to make a margin in if you're not successful. And so a recommendation of a minimum of 300 rooms automatically adds another 109,500 room nights to the campus. So how do you entice a private developer to come in and feel like they can be successful based on what you're adding, which in large part, you know, is dependent on how many square feet you're going to add in convention space, how many heads you're going to be able to put into beds, and then what type of rate you can get out of your convention client for them to come stay in the hotel, because $115 in today's world does not, it doesn't cut it. From the little bit that I'm dangerous in knowing, we developed 8 hotels in the last 2 years. If you're looking at a full service type of a hotel and you're probably looking at going many stories in the air, I feel strongly that in a ground lease situation with the city kicking in the dirt, you're still looking at $200,000 to $250,000 per door by the time you're open, which is anywhere from $60 to $75 million. I mean, you guys have heard the numbers reported in the media on what the development costs downtown just for the hotel piece, and if you go back and do the math, that was $350,000, $400,000 a room. Doing business with Marriott and Hilton, which are the leaders of the industry, is not cheap. Today's world, operating hotels, especially full service, is a very dynamic business, and I think the city will be challenged to have a private developer and or a private management come in here and be excited about this opportunity if there's not significant public dollars going towards the development.
I would agree.
And you talk about the 2040 goggles and put the 2040 vision in place. What does the Sheraton look like in 2040? How much money is the city and or the private owner going to contribute to the Sheraton? Will Marriott offer a license through 2040? Typically in today's world, when those things change hands or they have a 20-year term to start with, and based on the age and the quality of your asset, they may give you another 10 or 15 years. In Sioux Falls, we probably have a little, we're protected a little bit because we don't have a significant amount of new supply being built around us competitive to where they would feel like, hey, we can forego this license for other better opportunities. But it'll be a discussion that has to be had, and every 7 to 14 years, they're going to require significant investment in the hotel, from soft goods to case goods to so on and so forth, that can add up to 15 or 20,000 a room, over 240 rooms. I mean, it's a lot of money. That's kind of what I'm getting at, and I think it's going to be a very complex piece of the puzzle, because I don't think it's going to be an easy task for the city to identify a private developer and a private operator that is going to come in and pay for a hotel.
That's a great point, and if you all recall, if you were around back when the Sheraton was built, it wasn't easy to get the Sheraton. So it won't be easy, and Danny's right on. It won't be easy, but if this area is going to grow and we're going to make this happen out here, it's got to happen somehow.
Geez, Danny, way to be a wet blanket on.
Sorry.
It's real. That's real.
The business, it's tough out there in today's environment. I mean, Marriott and Hilton, which I would strongly encourage the city to look at first and foremost. They have the highest quality of a full service, brand out there. They're the 2 strongest reservation systems and loyalty programs in the hotel industry. So not only when you're bringing conventions into town, but when you have other people traveling to Sioux Falls, whether it be on business or for leisure, they've got that Marriott loyalty program number or Hilton Rewards Honors program number. They're using those credit cards, they're accumulating points. It's how travelers, spend their dollars. And so, when I just think off the cuff, for Sioux Falls, we have a Sheraton, which is in the Marriott family. A full-service Hilton or an Embassy Suites type of a hotel kind of falls in line with the vision of a full-service type of asset out here. But it's expensive, and the margins are thin, especially when you get into full service. The fees you pay to the franchise companies are high, and the development costs are high.
Well, there's no doubt it's gonna be a heavy load to lift. And there's been a lot of discussions around it, and we've all had them in this community of what we're gonna try and do. And if it was easy, Sioux City would do it. But here we are, we're gonna make this thing happen. I have a lot of confidence in our community leaders to go forward, so I understand it's gonna be tremendously hard to get that. But if we don't make this move forward, if we don't tell the community leaders and the mayor, here's what we think we need in this city, nobody's gonna, this is the first step. We might not get there, and I appreciate the cost and the hard work that's gonna have to go into it, but I would think it could happen.
So I think my recommendation for the language in the proposal here would be to eliminate the end of the sentence, the first sentence, which says, and a minimum of 300 additional rooms. I think that the number of rooms is specifically tied to what happens in the complex. And there are hospitality companies that specialize in feasibility studies based on what's in the market and what type of facilities you have. So I don't know how we wordsmith it, but I would encourage that, a hotel will be an important component. I mean, if we're gonna add additional flat floor space and other amenities out here, a hotel's needed. We can't, Terry's made a case for that. We can't generate the big trade shows and conventions without it. I just think that there just needs to be a understood way of how we go about determining the size and what type of hotel that is. And the number is arbitrary at this point, I think, for additional rooms.
And truly, by the time we get to the point of we're really going to build this 60,000 additional square feet, we'll want to we'll want to take a look at the reality of the business at that time, what's happening, because it changes quickly. And that 300 may change to be 400, or it may change to be 250. And so we will always watch that, but hotels will, they all have their own studies.
Is changing the language to as many additional rooms as possible valid substitution?
Fine with that. We just looked at other communities, what they had for space, and we looked at through that lens, not through the lens of a developer, but where we had a minimum needed to be. But that number moved as the part evolved, as the campus evolved. We talked significantly about that.
The numbers that the CBB has used has been based on what we have been told by meeting planners we must have in order to book their business, and that's multiple meeting planners. So we've gotten that information directly from the planners.
And it could be as simple as reading that, including a restaurant and a feasible number of hotel rooms based on, the other decisions that are made.
Based on demand.
Based on demand and
That can
additional.
increase our competitiveness for
Sure.
attracting
Yeah.
additional business, maybe.
I just think, putting a specific number in there just it immediately puts a specific number in there. And at the end of the day, we only need 180 rooms. Well, I thought you were going to build 300 at least.
Right.
So.
Good discussion.
Thank you for the call.
Everybody comfortable with that change? Connectivity to the event center campus, I think, as we've been discussing, we've heard over and over and over from just about every user group about the importance of connectivity, about the economic feasibility of whatever their entity is. And our discussion several weeks ago about connectivity to downtown specifically, that does already house many of the amenities we saw through the public surveys. Everybody wants, in addition to their capstone activities they're taking in at this campus. So I think it's forward-thinking of the city, and we should take this opportunity to continue to push along that conversation of rapid transit in between downtown Sioux Falls and this campus. Any other comments, concerns on that?
Yeah, and the one thing that I would ask, I apologize for not bringing this up earlier. We had talked quite a bit about, and I don't know if this falls into parking or connectivity, but we had talked about enhancements to like ride share and passenger drop off and pickup. I think that would alleviate some of the pressure on the parking, and I'm not sure where we could make that as a recommendation within these additional considerations, if that, again, falls under parking or connectivity. I think it's important to the future to have that as a recommendation for this group.
Maybe that's a line we could add under the master plan concept because of changes.
Sure.
We'll also just do parking / access, and that first one is sort of, yeah.
And Eric, just so you know too, we've had discussions with the city, with TJ and the parking and different thing like that, so we are moving forward with steps as far as the parking and ingress and egress plan, and also with ride share to, as far as the location, pick up and drop off, stuff like that. So those talks have happened, and hopefully this fall we'll be able to implement some of those.
That'd be great.
So-
Yeah, I just think it's important to add in to our recommendations, saying moving forward, it's just going to get more and more important. So, great.
And it could go under the new entrance, or how we design that.
You know,
But we did talk about that, so thanks for bringing that up, Eric.
This next one goes back to a lot of what we already discussed when we were talking about the convention center, which was, even if we add an additional 60,000 square feet, it's not enough. And this comment came through some task force members who, after looking at the first draft and realizing that 60,000 wasn't enough, that we ought to consider recommending additional space, but not necessarily on this campus. That would maybe another 60,000. We were about tapped out on this campus.
Maybe Mr. Budmeyer for the group, I think Dan's flipped over to the next page on that recommendation. There we go. Maybe.
I think this one is a little bit tricky. I struggle personally a little bit with the scope of this committee to recommend space somewhere else. I think we've heard from so many of the user groups that they would be successful downtown. I would appreciate being downtown because it does have many of the amenities we talked about with walkability and entertainment and restaurants. So I open that up for conversation.
Well, Dan, I agree with you. I think that it's difficult for us as the event center sort of task force to propose this, but I mean, the bottom line of what this is saying is, you know, the event center should have been, or the convention center should have been downtown in the first place, is what we're hearing from the user groups who are using these in other communities, and they want all the walkability amenities. But we've got a major investment in the location we've got, and I don't really understand the logistics of operating two convention centers and the redundancy and costs. It would be a little bit, I feel like that wouldn't be a wise sort of recommendation, not knowing how difficult that might be.
I also struggle with defining exactly how many square feet that should be.
Numbers and business sense warns that we don't want to cannibalize the Sioux Falls, the city of Sioux Falls' own business. And so if the timing of this 50,000 square feet going downtown actually cannibalizes the business that happens out here, it would not be in the best interest of the city or the taxpayers. So if this remains there, we would have to tie it somehow to the expansion here, which allows us to go for a different market for this space and then the smaller market for that other space. But just looking out for the business of Sioux Falls.
I maybe defer to Terry there a little bit, but I think it would be going after a different market. I think if you were to expand this convention center out here and double it, I think we discussed the flexibility out here. You can focus on some of the smaller things and multiple events at the same time, but I think the focus out here becomes the large scale conventions and the 50,000 square foot space, whether that's defined as a certain size or not downtown, I think really capitalizes on the benefits of downtown Sioux Falls that are specific to our community, but then the benefits of convention space downtown. Anywhere you go in the United States, convention centers are extremely successful downtown, and I agree. I think you look back and originally, sure, it should have been, convention space should have been downtown. We're of course, very much so everybody agrees, we're beyond the fact that we are out here. We need to focus on what we have out here also, but I think we've got a unique opportunity here to really focus on something that would be a benefit for the city of Sioux Falls in the long term.
So, or can we, I think this is just such an interesting point here, because I think we've talked to the user groups and we've talked to Terry, and I think we can all agree that even expanding out here 60,000 square feet, we're still maybe middle of the pack. And so I think where this bullet maybe came from our discussion was, what we're hearing is there's still a significant demand that could probably support something at an alternative location. And so maybe it's rewording it, saying that the task force recommends the city supports the development of additional space at a different location. I'm just bringing that up for conversation, if that takes away some of the concerns of even going there.
Question for you, Terry. Do we benefit from having 120,000 square feet out here and 50,000 downtown, or 170,000 square feet out here? I mean, convention space is convention space.
People want to be downtown. I mean, that's just the bottom line. But we also know we can book more business if we have more space. But we also know that some of those groups who want more space don't want to be out here. They want to be downtown. The walkability thing, it's just kind of a spiral that just keeps going. I mean, we're kind of caught because, you know, they come and do a site visit and, gee, what a nice convention center, blah, blah, but where are the shops? Where's the coffee shops? Where's all the walkability out here? Well, we can bus you downtown, it's only 5 minutes. No. Where is the walkability? We want all the activity. You take them downtown and it's like, oh, this is it. This is where we want to be. Oh, we don't have the meeting space downtown. Would 50,000 square feet do it? For some. This is a great convention center. It's just in an unfortunate location because nothing has built up around it.
The confusion I see is if you make an additional consideration of 50,000 square feet of convention space downtown, what else would need to be built downtown immediately to support that 50,000 square feet of convention space? There's only 3 hotels downtown: the Holiday Inn, the Hilton Garden Inn, and the Country Inn and Suites. And today, they're very busy, especially during the summertime with all of the other business environment happening downtown. So, do we run into questions and confusion about, well, what else would need to go downtown other than just a building of 50,000 square feet of meeting space? Just a question for consideration.
And maybe it's a little bit broader. And then instead of, again, defining exactly 50,000 square feet, it's in terms of, I think, adding approximately 60,000 square feet is a good start here, but again, it's not enough. There's probably enough convention center business.
I mean, we need the space out here, and I think we could sell it. We're gonna have to do a lot more buying of business to I mean, we buy business now because we have to. But we're gonna have to do more of that. They love Sioux Falls, it's just there's nothing to do out here.
To be clear also, it's not just the big convention stuff and things like that. We do a ton of other business out here, local business. Like we've got a Vera in here right now, different things like that. We do a ton of other business besides the out-of-town business. And sometimes we have to turn away in-town business because we do have out-of-town. The additional space is going to allow us to serve both those entities and continue to do that. So I don't want to have the main focus on just the out-of-town convention stuff that's coming in. We do serve a lot of people in the community as well, like that, so.
And we focus on bringing in people because that's where the economic impact is for the broader community. But yes,
Every dollar matters. It's a bumper sticker.
certainly to put 50,000 square feet downtown and add the square feet out here is not a bad thing to do. It's not a negative thing to do. I mean, we've got to keep growing. Either that or get out of the industry.
How much was the, I know we're adding, the goal is to add another 60,000, but there's a limit, and I don't remember what was the limit
Of how much to add.
of how much more you can add above and beyond that.
Well, and it depends on, you know, how you're going to do it.
Yeah.
Are you just going to plop 50,000 here or 60,000 there, or are you going to, you know, have a plan?
Well, to Andrea's point about cannibalization, it would need to be done and structured as such that, again, just the booking calendars, again, one entity, in my mind, needs to run both, because otherwise then there will be cannibalization, non-communication, and stuff like that. We need to get away from that to make sure that we're capitalizing and maximizing our space and our time and our efforts, and resources as well. If we need additional tables or chairs or anything like that from one to the other, if it's all under one umbrella, those resources can be shared. If we're talking about separating different entities like that, that makes it very difficult, and you're setting yourself up for failure.
Unless it's a hotel that builds that 50,000 square feet. Then it's theirs.
But again, if the hotel is doing that, they're taking away from city-run dollars as well.
True, but the economic impact is still citywide.
Economic impact
And
is
you
still
see that in
citywide.
cities all over the country.
Correct.
I think there's an opportunity for us to recommend what we did in terms of the here and now, and then an opportunity to say, as the community continues to grow, whether it's here, whether it's somewhere else, we know that our needs are going to continue to grow over time, and that likely this won't be the last project whenever that happens. We did talk about that, and we did also talk about the scope of this. While we need to think broad and what's best for the community, we're tasked with this campus. And that was the scope of our discussion. So I'm with you on what that looks like and how that's structured from a public-private. We didn't go down that path on the project now on this campus.
And I think it's fair that we don't have to define that. I think what is fair is, from our perspective, we need additional flat floor space here, and we need it right now. I think it's an opportunity to set the tone of, that's not enough space now, let alone in 10 or 20 years from now. And based on all the testimony we got from user groups, downtown seems to be the high energy use for even more additional flat floor space.
I have some difficulty with that recommendation, not because I don't think it's the right move, Eric. I think, proposing a 50,000 or something downtown and 60,000 here, I have no doubt the downtown space would be successful at whatever size it is. I think based on the information we've been hearing, Terry, we could do it. My question is I think we will ultimately cannibalize from this location. I think ultimately we will end up moving that direction. Why would we add 60,000 here, 50, nearly 60,000 there? Would we do 120,000 there and walk away from this tens of millions of dollars in investment we have here? I think that's kind of what we're talking about. The question I think that the group has is, we think that this can work in this location, even though it's not the ideal location, but for the sake of the taxpayer, it might be it's the best investment potentially to not walk away from all the investment dollars we have in this location. That's where I'm challenged by, if we're going downtown, which I'm a huge proponent of, I think we go downtown full speed. That's not really what this task force has been talking about or discussed up to this point, really. We've been focusing on this location, and based on the information we've heard, this location can be successful with additional flat floor space. I'm just worried that we're going to start splitting resources and ultimately double this and walk away in 10 years. I don't like the sound of that either. So I have a little trouble with this. I like the idea of the private enterprise figuring that out, not city tax dollars, I guess.
Well, I agree with Tom. I don't think that our mission was to determine what was best for downtown or what was best for CVB. We were determining what was best for this footprint. And so by saying what we should do downtown, I think we take away from what we are actually telling them people will be successful down here. So of all the things we've talked about, the additional convention space downtown, I think should be deleted from our recommendation.
Just let that be a separate thing if and when that might happen.
I think getting
Focus
back
on what we were supposed to do here.
Getting back to what Terry brought up earlier and mentioned earlier, that the 60,000 isn't it for our community to look in 2040, what that looks like. If it's office campus, I don't know if it's this group's role to figure that out. Done with Tom, we didn't spend a lot of time on, this is assuming there is a spot where you could park a 50,000 square foot convention center downtown. We didn't do that analysis. I think leaving it open to the city to do what's best for the city over time.
I also want to circle back and say, I think the people who made the decision to move the convention center here and put the Denny Sanford Premier Center here, I think that it was an actual thoughtful decision. And from trying to put myself in that time and place, I think it was the right decision in that time and place as well. Because we, as a community, are a driving community. I've lived many places. That's just how we are in South Dakota. We describe our distances in hours, not miles, because we don't have a lot of stows or traffic jams. And so I think this was the right place at that time. And I think it can continue to serve our community very well. So I don't think we've lost anything, and I don't think we'll lose anything by investing more here. Soapbox, put away now. Sorry.
And I guess I would just add that I think the recommendation definitely does say in addition to the space out here. So I don't think that the city should move forward with an expansion out here, then 10 years abandon here, or put more efforts into anything downtown. I just think there is enough success downtown. It's the heart of our city. It's really one of the greatest strengths of the city of Sioux Falls. And that's where I think that the city can really support an additional convention center space downtown. And if the group doesn't want that recommendation, I understand, and that's fine. But I think now's the time to put a formal recommendation there.
I agree with Eric. think at least should have, the suggestion should be there, because we have talked about it. We do tons of research into it because this is our focus, but there was a lot of conversation that we had with Terry and group and a few numbers, and we did a few maps and did all that kind of stuff, and so I think it is good to say this is something we've discussed and would recommend them considering.
And I'd maybe propose broadening the language a little bit, maybe to suggest that it's not a short-term goal, it's more of a long-term goal and something that the city needs to look in, maybe even following the eventual construction of additional space out here. Maybe it's that far out in the future, and especially if the additional, 50,000 square foot, the specifics on the size of something like that is maybe a little too specific. I'd be open to striking that language as well.
It's great debate. I would like you two sides to just keep going until one of you convinces the other. We can be done with it. I do think it's important to note that there's a reason that component is in this section of additional considerations rather in the formal recommendations as to the convention center space. It's, in my mind, it's more of a, we talked about this is important, please keep this in mind as the community moves forward with their thought process. Let's circle back to it, let's keep going for now. Adjacent land acquisition. Again, I don't think we need to overcomplicate this one. We all know that over the next 20 years, things are going to change surrounding this campus, within this campus, and the mentality that it would be wise for the city to consider adjacent properties to this campus as they become available. Not necessarily go seek them out, but as they become available to look to include them within the campus. Is a good mind frame to have. Any concerns with that? Green space, a new entrance. I think, again, at the last meeting, we had conversation about we don't have a well-defined entrance into the facility, and as the facility changes and grows, it's going to become even more important. And we need some green space. We need something that's green and not just this pavement of the sea of pavement all throughout. If you look at the aerial, if the baseball stadium is not here any longer, it's pretty hard to find anything green on this campus. So again, the mind frame of as the city moves forward with the campus of a well-distinguished entrance and some green space would be important. Any comments there? And then one of the things we talked about probably at the very end of our last meeting was once we set this direction, and if the mayor and council agrees, it's going to be time to really dig into the details of what this campus could look like in detail on things like ride sharing and parking and where does the next hotel go and where does the next convention center go and what part of it is attached and where. So real detailed master planning is in order for this campus in the future. It will be much easier for that next phase to take place if you follow these recommendations and you have a lot of those variables out of the conversation. Anybody disagree there?
I think my only suggestion would be is that should maybe be one of our first bullets on the additional considerations. Because I think that's a big piece in terms of the long-term planning of what this looks like out here, and probably be a quick first next step. To move things forward.
Green space and new entrance is likely a sub-component of that.
Agreed. That could easily be combined into one.
because we talked a lot about those, the walking the lakes activity, all that needs to be considered.
Before we circle back to additional convention center space, are there any other things in this area you'd like to see included?
The only thing that I'd add that I think came up, and maybe I missed it, was there was a recommendation, I think, from SMG for us to maybe consider some additional storage and other capabilities within the Premier Center as things grow out here. Is that, can you expand on that, Mike, just to make sure we don't miss that comment, but I think that's something we heard a couple times.
Yeah, I think in any design feature of the proposed existing or proposed convention space, additional convention space, there should be adequate storage for our operations needs, tables, chairs, staging. I talked about an additional need for a kitchen down in that area, because then the main kitchen is closer to the Premier Center, so anything down here becomes a challenge. So that we get requests for nursing mother rooms, gender-neutral restrooms. Those, to me, should be factored in new construction as well, to be more up to date with what our societal needs are.
One other comment too, page 14, additional hotel rooms. We will make a comment here about, in order to attract an NCAA men's basketball tournament, what one of the items is that's required, which is true. There's probably a lot of other things that are required too of that, so we just X that or include all. Would be my only question or comment on that. Talking about the separate meeting rooms. Sure. We could probably just leave that.
Let's go back to additional convention space and the thought process of potentially recommending some downtown. Let's go around the room and kind of take a straw bale poll on what your thoughts are on that. Eric, would you mind starting for us?
Be happy to. Back to, I think Tony brought it up, just our purview of the event center campus. I guess my opinion is this might be something that we don't actually necessarily recommend from our specific task force. I, in no way am saying that I don't agree with the fact that a downtown convention center would be helpful for the CVB to seek more folks coming to downtown and Sioux Falls in general. I just, in the purview of our work here, maybe it doesn't make sense to even put that in a recommendation. So I guess I'm still a little wishy-washy. I'm seeing both sides of the argument. I just, from our purview, I mean, we're making a recommendation off of this campus. That's not part of what we were brought together.
This is a really, this is switching horses in midstream, to say the least, if we start looking or proposing or even considering downtown. I'm a strong proponent of the benefits of going downtown. I think in the long term, for the strength of the Sioux Falls taxpayer and the economy of Sioux Falls, downtown is where it should be. I disagree with Andrea. I think it should have been there 20 years ago. I think there was people that thought that. I think any planners and economic development people, I'm sure there were good ones then that thought otherwise, but there were plenty that would say downtown was where it should have been. I still think that's where it should be. I think if we looked at 50 years out and what we were doing for the best use of the taxpayer, we'd say, yeah, it's downtown. We've planted a flag here, and I have a real challenge with walking away from tens of millions of dollars, not to mention the private investment that's here right now. I don't like it. I don't think it's good planning. I think the decision has been made. I'd like to promote private development downtown. But if we're gonna make a recommendation that we consider downtown, I feel like we're not really making a recommendation at all. And we have to make a recommendation here of some kind. And while it's difficult for me to say, I think in the 2040 plan and shorter, the plan is here for expanding the convention center. It's difficult, it pains me to say that, because I do think that the long-term success, and so I'm all right with trying to come up with a creative way to say that, you know, for the long-term viability of Sioux Falls, that we still need to consider convention space downtown. I guess, I don't know how to do that, but I think we have to move forward with some sort of recommendation, or we haven't, you know, a good, solid recommendation that this is the plan. And I think I'm okay, I'll probably change my mind by the time we go around the room and listen to everybody, but I'm okay with saying, we have to make a strong recommendation that we're going to add space here and move forward.
My perspective on it is, given the task at hand, obviously hindsight makes us all really smart. That 2020 view is clear. Vision 2020, not time frame 2020. And I think we have to make a recommendation for this campus. And so while I wasn't, I didn't have an issue with that earlier, but as we discussed today, I would say we know we need more convention space to be successful, to be that community. I think a big step for all of us is to say in 20 years we are going to be double what we are now. You put that into your lens, vision, and you think, how's that going to work? That's a big step. So it is what it is. That's how I look at a lot of things. And I think we need to make a recommendation for this here and now for the next 3 to 5 years. So I'm okay with this not being there.
Well, just a little historical perspective on this building that we're sitting in and the Washington Pavilion. You know, that vote 20 years ago barely passed. 20 years ago, there were very few people that actually saw the need for the convention center. And the impetus was, don't tear down Washington High School, and they threw this on because some far-reaching, far-thinking people could see the need for this. So now here we are 20 years ago now. And the downtown has changed tremendously with the revitalization of Washington High School and everything that has gone on. Certainly, I was one who voted against it back then because I could not see the future down there. I think I have to agree with Jared that this recommendation could muddy the waters on what we're trying to do here, which is what our task is. Is downtown going to be different 20, 30 years from now than it is today? Yes, certainly. So it certainly is the heartbeat of what's going on at Sioux Falls today. 20 years ago, it wasn't. We had the loopers down there. It was not a very good place to be. And it is today, and I take my hat off to those people that could see that then. I certainly couldn't. So I would say, let's take this out. If we want to put an acknowledgement in here that downtown is a vital part of the convention and visitors bureau and draw to the city, if we just want to acknowledge that, we can do that as part of when we go back to say the connectivity to the event center. We have to connect to downtown because that's the heartbeat of the city. So I would say withdraw that section.
Adrian?
Did you learn weighing in first?
You were not.
I'll go, I gotta get going. So, and I'll just summarize what I shared before. We know we need the space, we've made an investment here. We can be successful here. So, in the short term, as quickly as we can get to 60,000 here, but knowing that if you're looking out 2040, we're gonna need more. Whether that's here or somewhere else, I don't know if we know today.
Thank you.
Okay, so from the purview of the community that originally built this, I feel, moving in and moving here 7 years ago, is that we built based on what we wanted to see to work, live, and play. It was a public vote. Yes, we want to do this, we want to have our weddings here, we want to go to concerts here. Under that purview, this was correct. Now we're trying to make this into a economic driver, and from that purview, I could see that this can continue to bring economic development to our community, but it does need to be connected to downtown in order to do that. But I don't think we should shy away that there's an opportunity downtown with convention center space. And if the convention center space is done outside of the opportunities that the city is controlling in their own, for a taxpayer, I would like for them to be active in that role of, so if it goes under a private developer, it doesn't cannibalize the taxpayer's return as well. So if it's just a participatory role on whatever happens downtown, which they do, the city is doing a great job doing, I just think that we want to be able to have a say in it, so we don't cannibalize our own business as a taxpayer and as the city of Sioux Falls. I believe that there's a business case that a convention center will happen downtown, or can happen downtown, and the city should make sure that our business interests are covered with that. I would hate for our investment to go to not out here, so I think we need to speak to it. What exactly that says doesn't have to be, it doesn't even have to be a recommendation. We just have to be mindful that we need more. More will happen. People are coming. And we need to plan for that.
I agree with that, needing to speak to it. And I think there is a strong business case as well. I don't know, I didn't ever hear, I thought that at one point we had a conversation about how much we could actually build out here, how much square footage we could actually build in the future, and we're still, at that point, I don't remember what the square footage is, but at that point, we're still behind. And so, I can see what you're talking about, Tom, and the concern about losing it out here and everybody goes downtown, because honestly, it really is the place. But I still feel that there's that need to address it, and if we're doing this and we're saying, follow this, and we don't address it, I mean, obviously, you know, billion people can do what billion people do, but I just think that we're missing it. If we don't at least say something about, we've had the conversation, we know that this is an opportunity, and we leave that to the city to figure out how they handle that next, or if they just set it off to the side and say, well, great idea, we're just gonna move that over here.
I would say that I think it's entirely within this group's purview to make a sub-recommendation like this is in this report. I think the whole debate for 20 years has been at this campus, whether things should be built downtown or without here. So I think that's a part of the broader picture. And I think it's very easy for us to make it easier on ourselves and say, hey, no, it's just this within these lines of this street, and that we're not thinking about anything else outside of this little box. But unfortunately, that's not the way the city works, and I think we have to have a broader vision and more long-term thinking than what is strictly happening out here. Because that's been, from the very beginning of this discussion, there are moving pieces, and everything affects everything else. And I don't think it's necessarily strictly this campus that we should be concerned about. So I would propose that we maybe broaden the language. I'll be frank that, and I'll just say that yesterday I came up with the language that we have. So I would maybe propose that we broaden it a little bit, make it a little bit more loose, and say that this is a long-term recommendation. Remove the stuff as far as the specific size goes, and I think there's opportunity for a partnership for us to support a private partnership doing that downtown, but I think at the end of the day, if the city of Sioux Falls doesn't push some form of involvement at the city level, there's going to be a private party that could come in and build a 40,000 square foot convention center downtown, and I think that's going to happen regardless of whether the city's involved with it or not. So I don't know whether that ends up a space downtown, like Mike kind of alluded to, whether it ends up actually being managed by SMG. But if we were to move in that direction, I think the city has a stronger interest than it maybe being entirely on the private side.
I agree with a lot of what was said. I don't agree or would not be supportive of the language as it's written. I think that overshadows the committee's focus and the efforts out here. You know, in the recommendation for the convention center, we set a minimum of 60,000 square feet. The size of what ultimately ends up being developed out here has yet to be determined. And so I would be supportive of, I mean, I don't disagree that additional convention space may or may not happen in the future downtown, but when we're talking about 2040 vision, I sure hope that the powers that be at City Hall and the people that are involved in the master planning of this have a 2040 vision in mind when they're developing this space right here. I mean, that's only 20 years from now. We need to be building and investing 20, 30, 40 million dollars in convention space with 2040 as part of that vision. So I just wouldn't be supportive of language that would take away from the focus and the efforts here, given the investment we've made. I mean, the convention space is here right now. We have the opportunity to maximize economies of scale with additional convention space, hotel rooms. There's land for things to be built on that, you know, the city already controls right here.
Well, I'll go. I think for the people that are here today, thank you for your participation, for being here. If you can tell, there's been a lot of active discussion about some of these issues, because we're bantering about it, we're talking about it, and I think one of the challenges we've had this entire process has been to make sure we don't drift off of the scope, right? And I think with respect to this bullet, it's been difficult, because I think we see some of the data and the information that suggests there's opportunity, and so I think we probably do need to edit this language, but I think at a minimum, we need to be able to say in these additional considerations that as the event center campus grows, long-term, the city needs to be proactive in facilitating additional retail, convention, and economic development opportunities to further advance the prosperity and success of our community. Because I think ultimately that's what we're after here, and what we all want to see happen, and we're just kind of trying to struggle with whether this fits in here or not. But I think we need to say something that addresses the fact that we have been having this conversation about, you know, all the different moving parts, and it hasn't been just limited to this campus. And we've spent a lot of time, effort, and energy on it, and so that's kind of how I feel about it.
Great. I'll bat last. First, this conversation pleases me. This is one of the goals of this task force, is to have this level of debate and conversation. You'd be hard pressed to find anybody that loves downtown more than I do. I agree with all the comments everybody's had, and they've all been valid. The fact that we are having this conversation has elevated that conversation for downtown already. Whether it's in the recommendation or not, it's already done some justice to that conversation downtown. I think that convention center space downtown is coming no matter what we put into our report. I think that, again, to our scope and the comments about scope, I agree that our job is this campus. But we can't be blind to what else is happening somewhere else in the community. So I think instead of adding a recommendation of the city should consider 50,000 square feet, I think we should scratch that completely and replace it with a consideration of if and when convention center space downtown develops, the city ought to work hard to find the connectivity and management style that benefits the city to maximum benefit. I don't think we have to recommend that it goes downtown. I think it's going to happen with or without that recommendation.
Maybe one small piece that we kind of left out a little bit of this conversation, but we've talked about a lot before, is rapid transit. And, you know, that's going to play a huge role in making sure that this campus is really connected in a really meaningful way, in ways that maybe people around here have never been familiar with or seen. But making sure that when there's conventions and people are coming to town, that it is really easy and quick to get downtown. And there's a whole education process and there's a whole marketing process that would have to go with the actual physical capabilities of pulling that off. And what that looks like, I have no idea, but I think that's a big part of it.
And I think it's a great point because we covered it quickly when we went through these additional considerations, but it's a game changer for both this campus and downtown.
I agree with you, Tom.
I do too.
So I would recommend we change that consideration to say something along the lines of if and when convention center space downtown develops, the city should work as a whole alongside with the CBB to make sure that they're getting maximum benefit from the flat floor space that is available in town.
Dan, do you want to be specific to downtown or do you want to say off-site?
It's probably fair to say offsite.
We're talking about downtown.
We are today, but again, with the 2040 goggles, you don't know what else could happen in this community.
We could say off-site or downtown.
I don't think it's our place to recommend additional flat floor space downtown, not this committee. Doesn't mean I don't think there should be. I don't think it's our place to do so.
So we're gonna say off-site or downtown? Is that what you said?
Open, but that's one option.
Thoughts on that?
I prefer it said downtown and semantics otherwise, but I'll go with the group regardless. It means the same thing, so, to me.
Is this thoughts on whether it says downtown or off-site? I think everybody knows, I mean, if you're going to build an additional, I mean, we're not even
What if
getting
it-
that.
I mean, it's
What-
downtown, we
what
talked
if-
about it
what
for
if
an
it
hour,
said-
that's where we want it to be at, right?
Can it not say both?
Sure, say both.
Any other comments? On that one specifically, or on any of these listed in additional considerations?
Can I just say this? I totally agree with Tom. It makes me nervous when you just say off-site. What does that mean? But I just want to say that. You can put in off-site in there. Just needs to be there.
One thing just to keep in mind, because I'm totally neutral of it. Either way, keep in mind that after the convention center, the next largest flat floor space in the city is the Rancoda, not too far from here, which is not downtown. So say downtown or offsite, I mean, there's room in the city for a lot of different venues in different areas.
Sanford Complex, too.
In Sanford Complex, just up the road too for sports and tournaments, so.
Are you ready now? So as a group, all in favor of the additional considerations with the changes we've discussed as a group thus far, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you. I think that nearly completes our business for the day. What am I forgetting?
I think that's completed. Thanks again, everybody, for participating. investing your time into helping make a recommendation on moving things forward. I think we can all agree that this is something we care a great deal about in our community for sure, and the future success and prosperity of it. And so if we weren't interested, we wouldn't be participating. And so I think we should all feel good about looking at things through the lens of facts, and making a recommendation that we can all be happy with our names behind. And hopefully by 2040, this looks dramatically different out here, and I'm sure the community will look a lot different. But yeah, thanks everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Ryan, so process-wise, now this goes to the mayor?
We'll take a little bit of time here, hopefully a week or less, to update this final document, make sure it is the spirit of what we've discussed here today, and then reach out to the mayor's office to deliver it to him. Ultimately, what he decides to do with it from there is up to him. But cannot thank you enough for your time, effort, debate, professional services you've offered up. Look for an email from me later to have a little wrap-up social together, and we can move forward from there. With that,
Well, and just on behalf of the mayor too, thanks for everyone. This is a big time commitment for everyone. You opened yourself up to the public to participate in this committee, which isn't always easy, and really appreciate everyone's insight, their expertise, their love of the city. It's very greatly appreciated, and thank you.
with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.